Hey, social studies for the child kiddos. This is your lecture over both government and economics. And in your notebook, you will see that they are both included in one graphic organizer in your notebook. For the government section, we will also have 2 times that you need to get onto Canvas and take part in a discussion there. So just so you know what's coming. For your graphic organizer, that is on page 48, and you can see government is at the top and economics is at the bottom. Pause this for a second and make sure that your notebook looks just like my notebook, and then come back to me. So when we talk about government in more of a K-3, even 4th and 5th grade setting, of course the National Council of Social Studies has some standards that they go by. You can see that power, authority, and governance are all keywords that they use, and you'll see in your notebook that power, authority, and governance are there because I want you to kind of reflect on what those words mean. The idea is that we want to examine the rights and responsibilities of the individual in relation to his or her social group. And so, of course, that can mean in a school setting, or maybe even on a soccer field, or in the kindergarten classroom, in the lunchroom, or even their parents when they're driving down the road or going to work, those type of things. But they need to be able to kind of explain the purpose of government, and then us as teachers can help do that by giving examples of how government does or does not provide for its people, right? And so we can go through there and say, okay, tell me some things about your town. List things that we have. Okay, we have a library, we have traffic lights, we have roads, we have schools. Just from that list, what things are provided by the government. And then from there, you can even go into different discussions about like a grocery store. A grocery store isn't provided for by the government, but when we look at the things in the grocery stores, does the government have any control of those things? Do they say what things are safe for us to eat or use? And so it's this open dialogue that is going to help social studies students take interest and really take part in the conversation in your classroom. So of course those 3 words focuses on knowledge and experiences. That's the big thing. That's why we want them conversating, that provide for the study of how people create and change structures. So I want you to personally reflect, what does power mean? What does authority mean? And what does governance mean? Go ahead and pause and get those down in your notebook. I want some words and I want some pictures in each one of those bubbles, and then come back to me. Okay, and then our second one is civic ideals and practices. And the idea there is that focuses on values and dispositions and experiences that provide the study of ideals, principles, and practices of citizenship in a democratic republic. So when we're thinking about certain things, the word civic ideals, ideally, when we are looking at civics in the United States, what comes to your mind, okay? And how do we practice those civic ideals? You see the little illustration of the bill dreaming about one day when he becomes a law, right? That is kind of one of those civic practices that we have. Civic ideals, how it should look like and what it's planned to look like. I think it's also very important for students to know also that just because it's an ideal and that's how it's supposed to look like, sometimes it always does not, just as in the classroom or the school or anywhere else in life. That's our goal and that's what we're aiming for, but sometimes things don't work out perfectly. And again, this is a good time to identify key ideals of U.S. Democratic Republican form of government, right? And so we can say, you know, in our country, what is a civic ideal to you, and what is a civic practice that we do. What does that mean to you? And this conversation that you have with your students is going to help them really understand it. What is not going to help them understand it is by you just simply giving them definitions, right? And so what I want you to do is civic ideals. There's a little bubble for you. I want you to kind of tell me what that means to you and illustrate it. And then practices also, your last little bubble on that page. Write what it means to you and illustrate it right there. Pause it and then come back to me. Okay, so since we've been teaching government and since we've had public schools, we've always had this enduring dilemma in the school system because we've traditionally, as teachers, been expected to socialize each new generation and the children of immigrants in particular in American values and political traditions. The dilemma comes off as we want students to understand American political values, but we also want to simultaneously respect and their cultural diversity. And so it is teaching our ideals and having them understand those things so they can be productive citizens, but not pushing our ideals onto them. It's a very, very thin line that you have to walk. Most teachers just simply shy away from the idea of this type of thinking, and so therefore there's really not enough government taught in schools because they don't even want to touch it, because it can quickly go political, and so they just stay away from it. But that is really affecting generations of students. So much so that in 2005, a federal law came into effect that requires teachers to teach about the U.S. Constitution one day out of the year, and it's called Constitution Day. And many states require instruction on core democratic values, and it depends on what state that you're teaching in. But these goals are not only addressed through content, but it's important to remember through school rules, you can incorporate them in your discussion or your learning communities, patriotic pageants that you might have. They have them a lot in the lower elementary grades, holiday celebrations, mock votes, election activities, student governments, current event activities, special units, and law education. All of those things can help kind of add the sprinkle and the sparkle to government education, but it cannot just be solely the government education. So as we are looking and we keep talking about these democratic values, here is a list of some of the democratic values that we teach. You have life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, justice and the common good, equality, truth, diversity, popular sovereignty, patriotism, the rule of law, individual rights. What I want you to do is really kind of think and reflect on all of those words, and I want you to hop onto Canvas and go to the discussion board that's called Democratic Values. And what I would like for you to do is find a picture or a photograph or some type of artwork that really symbolizes one of those words. Okay, so I can tell you now, you're going to type in The Pursuit of Happiness and it's probably going to bring up a movie of Will Smith. That doesn't make any sense, right? So you need to find some image and then be able to provide a strong critique on why that image symbolizes that democratic value. And so what you're going to do is you are going to post an image onto Canvas, tell me the word that you chose, and then a strong critique on why that makes sense. And then you are going to comment on just one other of your friends, your peers in class about what they chose. Now, most likely it depends on when you're doing this. It might not be up when you're listening to this lecture. So you might need to wait a day or so and then go back. So write that in your planner that that's something that you're going to need to do. But I do want us just to look about what does life or liberty or diversity or patriotism mean to ourselves and what it means to other people, and if it can even mean something different, because it probably does, just as diversity or equality means something different to the kids that you're going to be teaching. So that is just something I want you to go back and do. This next thing also, I really like this image for a lot of reasons. It's so important to just completely integrate the social studies curriculum with artwork. This particular painting is called Manifest Destiny. And we know that as early as 1751, Benjamin Franklin described his destiny for Americans was to fill up the new lands to the west, right? Okay, we have to remember, though, that there are some people living on those quote-unquote new lands. Jefferson, Monroe, and Adams all expressed expansionist dreams to head out west. But in the 1840s, however, under President Tyler Polk, the territory of the United States increased by nearly 800, over 800,000 acres through the annexation of Texas and the acquisition of many other lands. So not only was this expansion of 1840s dramatic, it was also pretty aggressive. And you can see some of those feelings and that tone of aggression by looking at this painting. Americans justified the expansion with the idea of manifest destiny, right? That they have divine providence of these lands, that they have national superiority and exceptionalism and the idea that it is theirs to take. And so what I would like for you to do is just spend some time. You're going to stop listening to me for a second, and you're going to spend some time and just kind of jot down your thoughts about this image. What things confuse you? What things do you notice? Look at the woman. Look at the foreground, the background. What things do you maybe have questions on? What things intrigue you or maybe make you angry or sad or get you excited? I would like for you to give me a really good critique of this piece of artwork. And then I would like for you to also comment on two of your peers, on things that they saw that maybe you saw differently, or points that they brought up that you thought, I never looked at it that way. And so what I'd like for you to do right now is pause this, and then I want you to look at it, think about it, and make your initial comment. And then if there's other people's comments, you can go to them as well. Once you're finished with that on Canvas, come back to me. Okay, so we have government in the classroom to think about. And students indicate that young children, studies indicate that young children tend to detect kind of more of a benevolent world in which political leaders are wise and they're caring and they're attentive to the needs of everyone, that they're always good and just. Usually they know nothing of Congress or Supreme Court or federal departments, and they have difficulty understanding that government leaders could be corrupt. Children usually do not think or know much about where the money to pay for government comes from, and most students do not understand that their own school is provided by local government, and the teachers are paid using taxes. And so these are just some of the ideas that we need to teach them. Okay, so some things to help students understand the importance of governments is to develop instruction around that basic idea that governments provide facilities and services that may be too big or expensive for just a small community to pay for on their own. And some of these things could include national defense, armed forces, roads, airports, transportation, education, criminal justice, police protection, emergency services, parks and recreation, postal service standards and regulations regarding tons of things, including those when we were talking about the grocery stores, and then safety net services for people with disabilities. And so some of you might have been like, I didn't even think that all of those things could be included. But it is our jobs as teachers not to put a political slant on it, but just to teach it just like any of the other sciences. This is a fact. The government does provide national defense. The government does provide armed forces. But what can be damning to this idea of teaching government is by saying, I don't feel comfortable, so I'm not going to teach it, because that is not what professionals do, right? You really are, if you don't feel comfortable teaching government, you still need to do it, and the more that you do it, the more that you will get comfortable with it. So that in itself is the government. Now we're going to move down to the economic side, and you will see on your graphic organizer, you have that top box is for the definition, and then the 3 are for 3 illustrations I'm going to have you do. So for economics, it is the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. And at this point in the semester, we've talked about the idea of economics in the social studies curriculum. It addresses the decision making about obtaining and using all kinds of resources, not just money, but others such as time, energy, or raw materials. The dilemma in economics is getting students to adopt the dilemma here is getting students to adopt the idea that even if their parents are maybe even like swiping a credit card, that does not mean that money is endless or that they can't see it. And so as we kind of progress into a new age of technology, it is difficult for them to understand that with each swipe is a transaction and money is being spent. And so because if you think even about money that you make and you get a check for and you deposit, or maybe even it gets sent directly to your bank, and then you pay for things using your debit card, you might not actually ever see that money. And so the dilemma is a lot of children don't even see transaction of money to be able to understand it or see how much it happens in their lives. The studies of communities, states, nations, and geographical regions typically include a strand focused on natural resources, and that again goes into this economics portion. And those include industries, occupations, goods and services produced by the people who live there. And again, we're a good way through the semester, and so you have seen those things already. So, things that children know about economics. They tend to believe, again, in that benevolent world, that people get whatever money they need from banks simply by asking for it, and shopkeepers sell items for the same price which they were bought. They do not understand the idea that if you go to one store, it's going to be cheaper and you can get the same thing than another store. I will tell you, by teaching a community in poverty, those children understand that the world is not benevolent and that you can't get whatever money you need. So it depends on the demographics that you're teaching on how true that first sentence really is. In preschool, typically there is no understanding of economics. They don't understand the value of money. As they get a little bit older, first through second-ish grade, they begin to comprehend the value and function of money in banks. You will see kids really start to pull apart at this level on maybe kids who have an allowance and who are given money to save and who've been told, no, you have to use your own money. All of those things is going to help encourage an understanding of economics in children very young. Older children, maybe ages 8 to 10, so like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, they begin to recognize source of money. Then later, the knowledge of shop profits and banking operations. They're going to start to understand those things a little bit better. Developments emerge sooner among children who are high achievers in math because they have direct economic experiences such as allowance, like we talked about before, saving for purchases, and having your own bank account. You can, let's say that you have a demographic that the parents do not have the resources to give them an allowance, or you have a demographic where the parents just give them cash whenever they want it. They're both not going to be able to understand what it's like to save up for money on their own. Now, those kids that are living in an environment that maybe have a really tight budget, they will understand, hey, if I want something, I'm going to have to save up for a long time. Most likely it's their parents that have been doing the saving, and they are aware of that. But just to know that just because a family has money or they do not have money is in no way an account of how well the students have been taught about money. Okay, so here are some ideas about that relate to economics, and I want you to choose 3 of them to illustrate in your graphic organizer. And what I want you to do is choose 3 that you think that you might have a weakness in, or you might feel uncomfortable in. And those are the 3 things that I want you to think about. Okay, when I'm in the classroom, these are the 3 things in economics that I am really going to hit the hardest, that I know that that I am going to make sure that my kiddos understand. So the first one is money is a medium of exchange needed in all societies. Denominations of coins and paper are offered for convenience. And for that one, really, that's taught in almost all of them. And I don't think it's a difficult thing to teach, so I don't think that should be one that you illustrate. Before money, people bartered, they traded. Money eliminates problems with bartering. Your seashell's bigger than mine. What is a seashell really worth? Early forms of money, such as stones and wampum, were more difficult to store and carry. Coins and paper money represent significant parts of our past as a country. If we look at it, there's a lot of fun history on a dollar bill or any other type of money. Money is made in factories called mints. That's very interesting. Banks not only keep money safe, but give loans and pay interest on savings. Budgets are plans to manage your money. Checks and credit cards allow people to transfer money from one spot to another. These right here, when we're talking about budgets, there's a lot of fun resources out there for kids of different age levels. When people start a business or buy a home, they often take out a loan. Value of items is often determined by want of others. Most people make money by working, and money is typically only good in the country it was issued. So I want you to choose 3 things that you know, I would really like to investigate this with my future classroom, and maybe even choose a couple or all 3 that you think, I don't even know much about this and I would like to know more. That is your government and economics lecture. Make sure that you finish your graphic organizer on page 48. Make sure that you also go back and comment and finish the 2 discussions on Canvas. Thanks, guys.